The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning in October, and my father tore it in half before I could finish reading the first sentence. Boston University. Full academic scholarship. 4 years, tuition covered, housing stipend included. The words were still processing in my brain when Richard Bennett, my father, reduced 9 months of secret work to paper scraps on the kitchen table. His face showed nothing. No anger, no surprise, just that flat expression he wore when he was about to deliver a lesson he thought I needed. "No daughter of mine is going to college," he said. My grandmother Grace sat 3 feet away with her coffee mug halfway to her lips. My brother Jamie, 14 and still in his soccer uniform from practice, stared at his plate. Uncle David, visiting from Hartford, cleared his throat but said nothing. And me, Maya Bennett, 17 years old, I sat there watching confetti fall onto the placemat my mother had bought at a craft fair 8 years before she died. I thought that was the worst thing that would happen that morning. I was wrong. Grace set down her mug. The sound of ceramic on wood was louder than it should have been. She looked at Richard the way you'd look at a stranger who just walked uninvited into your living room. "Pack her bags, Richard, or pack yours." My father blinked. Once, twice, like he'd misheard. "Excuse me?" "You heard me," Grace said. Her voice was steady, almost bored. "Maya goes to Boston, or you leave this house, your choice." The kitchen went silent. Not the comfortable silence of a Sunday morning, but the breathless kind that comes right before something breaks. Richard's jaw tightened. He leaned forward, hands flat on the table, the way he always did when he wanted you to understand he was in charge. "This is my house," he said slowly. "My rules," Grace smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. "Actually," she said, "it's mine." Let me take you back 9 years so you understand why that sentence mattered. The house on Cedar Drive looked solid from the outside. Red brick, black shutters, a lawn Richard mowed every Saturday at 7:00 a.m. because he needed the neighbors to know he was the kind of man who took care of things. The inside was different. The inside operated on schedules, rules, and silence. Thermostat at 62 degrees in winter. Television remote on his armrest. Dinner at 6 sharp, and if the salt wasn't on his side of the table, you'd know about it. That table, heavy oak with carved legs, and a wine stain near the corner where I always sat, had been in the house since before I was born. Grace bought it when she first furnished the place 23 years ago, but Richard called it his table, his house, his rules. I heard that sentence every week of my life after my mother died. Her name was Catherine. She had dark blonde hair that fell just past her shoulders and a way of humming while she cooked that made even scrambled eggs feel like an event. I was 8 when the cancer took her. Ovarian, stage 3, then stage 4 before anyone could do anything that mattered. She was gone by spring. Richard changed after the funeral. Or maybe he didn't change. Maybe grief just burned away whatever thin layer of warmth had been covering the real him all along. He moved through the house like a man boarding up windows. First, the photos came down. Every picture of Catherine, off the walls, off the fridge, into a cardboard box shoved into the basement behind the water heater. I snuck one out. A small photo of her holding me at a pumpkin patch. Both of us laughing, hay stuck in my hair. I kept it tucked inside my algebra textbook like contraband. Then the rules tightened. No mentioning Mom at the table, no crying where he could see it, no asking when things would feel normal again. I was 10 the first time he handed me a spatula and told me to make eggs. I burned them. He didn't yell. He just looked at me with that blank, assessing expression and said, "Your mother could do this in her sleep. Figure it out." So I figured it out. Eggs, then pancakes, then full dinners. Roast chicken, mashed potatoes, green beans, the same rotation every week. I did the laundry. I scrubbed the bathroom grout with a toothbrush on Saturday mornings. I packed Jamie's lunch every day and walked him to the bus stop even when it was sleeting. I wasn't his daughter. I was staff. Jamie got different treatment. He was allowed friends, soccer practice, sleepovers at Luca's trans house down the street. Richard called it giving the boy room to grow. But when I asked if I could join the debate team freshman year, Richard said I had responsibilities at home, and that was the end of the conversation. My routine was simple. Simple the way a cage is simple once you stop testing the bars. 5:30 alarm. 5:45 downstairs, coffee brewing, eggs on the stove. Richard liked his coffee black with exactly half a spoon of sugar. If I forgot, he'd slide the mug to the center of the table without a word and wait for me to fix it. 6:15, Jamie's lunch packed. 6:30, Richard's lunch packed because a 48-year-old man apparently couldn't manage a sandwich. 7:00, bus stop with Jamie. 7:40, school. 3:00, home. 3:15, start laundry if it was Monday or Thursday. Vacuum if it was Wednesday. 5:30, start dinner. 6:00, serve. 6:45, clear the table, wash everything by hand because Richard said the dishwasher wasted water. 8:00, homework. Finally. 9:30 or later, bed. He checked the fridge to make sure I'd shopped correctly. He checked my phone, a basic smartphone with parental controls that made it useless for anything except calls and texts, to make sure I wasn't wasting time. He didn't allow extracurriculars, no clubs, no sports, no friends over. "You've got responsibilities," he'd say, like I was 35 with a mortgage instead of 17 with a calculus test. "I know what you're thinking. Why didn't I leave? I was 17. I had $23 in a mason jar under my bed. I couldn't sign a lease, open a bank account, or enroll myself in school without a guardian's signature." Uncle David was too intimidated by Richard to intervene, and if I made noise, if I fought back, Richard had one threat that worked every time. "Keep it up and you'll never see your grandmother again." Grace was the only person who made me feel like I still existed as something other than a function. So I stayed quiet. I stayed useful. I stayed. But that September, something arrived that Richard didn't know about, and it almost didn't reach me. Here's what Richard didn't know. I applied to college. Not openly, not proudly, in secret like something illegal. It started with Ms. Chen, my school counselor, a sharp woman in her mid-50s who wore blazers with rolled sleeves and kept a file cabinet she called the vault. She'd noticed things, the way I never stayed after school, the way I flinched when someone raised their voice in the hallway, the way I always left exactly at 3:00, like I had a countdown timer in my chest. One afternoon in January of my junior year, she asked me to stay for a minute. She closed her office door and said, "Maya, what do you want to do with your life?" No one had ever asked me that. She helped me with everything. SAT prep books from her own shelf. Application fee waivers. Essay drafts written during lunch in her office with the door closed, my handwriting shaking on lined paper. We used the school's address as the return for every application because Richard checked the mailbox every single day like he was expecting evidence of a crime. But I also told Grace. One evening in March, I called her from Ms. Chen's office and told her everything. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Use my address as a backup. I'll watch for the letters." Grace got the letter first. Boston University. Full ride. She called me at school, and I had to step into the hallway to hear her over the noise in my chest. "You did it," she said. I had done it. Now I just had to tell Richard. Except I didn't get the chance. Because Grace showed up to the house that Tuesday morning with the letter in her purse and an expression I'd never seen on her face before. Determination. She waited until breakfast was over, until Jamie left for school, until Uncle David poured his second cup of coffee. Then she handed me the envelope across the table, and Richard snatched it out of my hands before I could open it. He read it. His face didn't move. Then he tore it in half, dropped it on the table, and delivered his verdict. "No daughter of mine is going to college." That's when Grace said the thing that changed everything. "Pack her bags, Richard, or pack yours." Richard stared at her like she'd started speaking a language he didn't recognize. "This is my house," he repeated. Grace reached into her purse and pulled out a folded piece of paper. She set it on the table, smoothed it flat with one hand, and slid it toward Richard. "Read it," she said. Richard picked it up. His eyes moved across the page. Once, twice. His face went pale, then red, then something worse than either. "This doesn't mean anything," he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "It's a deed," Grace said. "Signed, notarized, and filed with the county. This house has been in my name since I bought it in 1998. You've been living here rent-free for 20 years, Richard, because I loved Catherine and I wanted my grandchildren to have a stable home. But I won't let you destroy Maya the way you destroyed her mother." The kitchen went silent again. "What are you talking about?" Richard said. His voice was quieter now, defensive. "Catherine wanted to finish her degree," Grace said. "Nursing, she had 2 semesters left. You told her no. You said she needed to focus on being a wife and a mother. She listened. She stayed. And she spent 10 years cooking your meals and folding your laundry and wondering what her life could have been if she just had the courage to walk out that door. I had never heard this before. Neither had Jamie, apparently, because when I looked at him, he was staring at Grace like she just told him the sun was optional. That's not, Richard started. I have the emails, Grace said. Catherine sent them to me the year before she died. She was miserable, Richard. And she stayed because she thought it was the right thing to do. I won't let you do that to Maya. Richard sat back in his chair. He looked at the deed. He looked at Grace. He looked at me, and for the first time in 9 years, I saw something in his face I didn't recognize. Panic. So here's how this works, Grace said. Maya's going to Boston University in August. You're going to sign whatever financial aid forms she needs. You're going to smile and tell people you're proud of her. And if you do that, you can stay here. And if I don't, Richard said. Then you pack a bag and find somewhere else to live, Grace said, because this is my house. And I'm done watching you ruin my family. Richard didn't say anything. He just sat there, staring at the table, at the scraps of the letter, at the deed that had just dismantled 20 years of control. Grace stood up. She picked up her purse, straightened her blouse, and walked to the door. You've got until Friday to decide, she said. Then she left. The kitchen was quiet for a long time. Richard didn't look at me. Jamie didn't move. Uncle David, who'd been silent through the entire thing, finally stood up and said, I'll be in the living room. I sat there, staring at the torn pieces of my acceptance letter, and for the first time in 9 years, I felt something I'd forgotten how to feel. Hope. Richard didn't speak to me for 3 days. Not at breakfast, not at dinner, not when I passed him in the hallway carrying laundry to the basement. He moved through the house like I'd become invisible, and honestly, that was fine with me. I'd spent 9 years trying to stay invisible anyway. The difference now was that I wasn't doing it because I was afraid. I was doing it because I was waiting. Grace called me that first night. I answered from my bedroom with the door closed, sitting on the floor with my back against the bed. How are you holding up? She asked. I don't know, I said. He won't look at me. Good, Grace said. That means he's thinking. What if he chooses to leave? There was a pause, not a long one, but long enough that I could hear her weighing her words. Then he leaves, she said, and you and Jamie stay with me until August. But Maya, I don't think he will. Why not? Because your father's entire identity is built on control, Grace said, and the only thing he hates more than losing control is admitting he's lost it. He'll bend. He just needs time to convince himself it was his idea. She was right. On Thursday evening, 2 days before Grace's deadline, Richard came into the kitchen while I was making dinner. I was at the stove, stirring pasta, and I heard his footsteps behind me. I didn't turn around. We need to talk, he said. I kept stirring. I'm listening, I said. He cleared his throat. Your grandmother overstepped, but I've thought about it and I'm willing to compromise. Compromise, like he was doing me a favor. I turned off the burner and turned around. Richard was standing near the table, arms crossed, his face arranged in what he probably thought looked reasonable. What kind of compromise? I asked. You can go to college, he said, but you'll commute. Boston University has housing, but you don't need it. You can live here, help with Jamie, keep the house running. It's only a 40-minute drive. I stared at him. You want me to go to college and still cook your dinners? I'm not saying it like that, Richard said. I'm saying family helps family. You've always helped. That doesn't stop just because you're taking some classes. Some classes. Like a bachelor's degree in biology with plans for medical school was a hobby I was picking up on weekends. No, I said. Richard's expression shifted. Not anger, not yet, but something close. Excuse me? I said no, I repeated. I'm going to Boston. I'm living on campus. I'm not commuting an hour each way so I can keep scrubbing your bathroom. Maya, you're being unreasonable. I'm being clear, I said. Grace gave you 2 options. You're trying to create a third one that doesn't exist. Richard's jaw tightened. He took a step closer, and I felt that old, familiar tightness in my chest. The instinct to fold, to apologize, to make myself smaller so he'd stop looking at me like I'd committed some unforgivable crime. But I didn't fold. I looked him in the eye and said, if you can't accept that I'm leaving, then you need to start packing. He opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. I have given you everything, he said quietly. A roof over your head, food, stability, and this is how you repay me? You didn't give me anything, I said. Grace did. This is her house. And I've been paying rent and laundry and groceries since I was 10 years old. Richard's face went red. For a second, I thought he was going to yell. But he didn't. He just turned around and walked out of the kitchen. I heard his footsteps on the stairs, heard his bedroom door close, and then the house was quiet again. I stood there, still holding the wooden spoon, my hands shaking. Jamie appeared in the doorway a moment later. He'd been in the living room doing homework, but I knew he'd heard everything. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, "I'm okay." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Good," he said, "because he's full of crap." I laughed. It came out sharp and unexpected, and Jamie grinned. "I'm serious," he said. "He acts like you owe him something, but you've been doing all the work around here for years. If anyone owes anyone, it's him." "When did you get so smart?" I asked. "I've always been smart," Jamie said. "I just didn't know if it was safe to say it out loud." That hit harder than I expected. Friday morning arrived, and Richard still hadn't packed. He came downstairs at 6:15, dressed for work, poured himself coffee, and sat at the table like it was any other day. I was at the stove making eggs. The routine was so automatic I didn't even think about it anymore. "Maya," he said. I didn't turn around. "Yeah, I'll sign the forms." I froze. The spatula hovered over the pan. "What?" "The financial aid forms," he said. "I'll sign them. You can go to Boston." I turned around slowly. Richard was looking at his coffee mug, not at me. "And I can live on campus?" I asked. He hesitated. "Yes. And you're not going to guilt me about it every time I come home?" His jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Fine," I said. "Thank you." He didn't say anything else. He finished his coffee, grabbed his lunch from the fridge, and left for work. I stood there in the kitchen, eggs burning on the stove, trying to process what had just happened. Grace called 20 minutes later. "He agreed," I said. "I know," Grace said. "He called me at 6 this morning to tell me I was manipulative and that he hoped I was happy." "Are you happy?" "Extremely," Grace said. "Now let's talk logistics." Over the next 3 months, Grace helped me with everything Richard refused to do. She drove me to Boston to tour the campus. She helped me apply for additional scholarships, small ones, $500 here, $1,000 there, enough to cover books and supplies. She took me shopping for dorm essentials, bedding, towels, a desk lamp that didn't flicker. Richard signed the FAFSA forms like he'd promised, but that was the extent of his involvement. He didn't ask about my classes. He didn't ask about my roommate. When relatives called to congratulate me, he said, "She's going to Boston," in the same tone you'd use to report the weather. But I didn't need his approval anymore. I had spent 9 years trying to earn something from him that he was never going to give: recognition, pride, the basic acknowledgement that I was worth more than the meals I cooked and the floors I scrubbed. And somewhere between Grace's confrontation in the kitchen and the day I packed my bags for Boston, I realized I didn't need it. I was going anyway. Uncle David pulled me aside one afternoon in July. We were at Grace's house, helping her organize some boxes in the garage, and he asked if I had a minute to talk. "I owe you an apology," he said. I looked at him, surprised. "For what?" "For not standing up for you sooner," David said. "I knew what Richard was doing. I saw it. And I told myself it wasn't my place to get involved, that it was between him and you, and that was cowardice. I'm sorry." "It's okay," I said. "It's not," David said, "but I'm glad you got out. And I want you to know if you ever need anything, money, a place to stay, someone to call at 2 in the morning because college is hard, you call me." "I will," I said. "Thank you." He nodded, and we went back to sorting boxes. But the apology stayed with me. Because it was the first time someone in my family had looked me in the eye and admitted they should have done more. August arrived faster than I expected. Grace drove me to Boston on a Saturday morning. Jamie came too, sitting in the backseat with my desk lamp balanced on his lap. Richard said he had to work, but I knew he was avoiding the goodbye. The drive took an hour and 15 minutes. Grace talked the whole way, pointing out landmarks, coffee shops near campus, the best place to get cheap textbooks. Jamie plugged in his headphones halfway through and stared out the window, but I caught him smiling once when Grace made a joke about my roommate probably being less annoying than him. We arrived at the dorm just after 10. 00 a.m., the building was old brick with tall windows and a courtyard full of students hauling suitcases and mini fridges. My room was on the 4th floor, a small rectangle with 2 beds, 2 desks, and a window that overlooked the quad. My roommate's side was already set up. Posters on the wall, string lights above the bed, a corkboard covered in photos. My side was empty. Grace and Jamie helped me unpack. It took an hour. When we were done, Grace stood in the middle of the room and looked around with her hands on her hips. "It's perfect," she said. "It's small," I said. "It's yours," Grace said. "That's what matters." Jamie hugged me before they left. A real hug, not the awkward side squeeze we usually did. "Don't forget about me when you're a famous doctor," he said. "I won't," I said. "Call me if you need anything." "I will." Grace hugged me last. She held on longer than usual, and when she pulled back, her eyes were red. "Your mother would be so proud of you," she said. I nodded because if I tried to speak, I'd cry. "I'll call you tomorrow," Grace said. "Okay." They left. I stood in the middle of my dorm room, surrounded by boxes and bags and the quiet hum of a building full of people I didn't know yet, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 9 years. Peace. That first week was overwhelming. There were orientations, campus tour, meetings with advisors, and a constant flood of new faces and names I couldn't keep straight. My roommate, Stephanie, was a sociology major from Vermont who talked fast and laughed loud and had strong opinions about which dining hall had the best breakfast sandwiches. She was kind. She didn't ask why I flinched when someone knocked on the door too hard. She just existed in the space next to me without requiring anything, and that was enough. I called Grace every Sunday night. We talked about classes, the campus, the weather. She updated me on Jamie, who joined the cross-country team and was apparently thriving, according to his coach. She didn't mention Richard unless I asked. I didn't ask. One Thursday in late September, I was in the library studying for a biology exam when my phone buzzed. A text from Richard. "Your grandmother told me you made the dean's list. Congratulations." I stared at the message for a long time. It was the first thing he'd said to me since I left. I didn't respond. 3 weeks later, another text. "How are classes going?" I didn't respond to that one either. Grace told me later that Richard had asked her how to fix things. She said she told him the truth, that some things don't get fixed, they just get left behind, and if he wanted a relationship with me, he'd have to accept that it would look nothing like the one he'd tried to control for 9 years. I don't know if he understood that, but I did. October in Boston felt like a different planet. The air was crisp without being punishing. The trees on campus turned colors I'd only seen in postcards, and everywhere I looked, people were walking with purpose, carrying books and coffee, living lives that belonged to them. I was one of those people now. My biology professor, Dr. Helena Reyes, was the kind of person who made complex concepts feel simple. She had gray hair cut short, reading glasses perpetually perched on top of her head, and a teaching style that assumed you were smart enough to keep up. I liked that. No hand-holding, no coddling, just clear explanations and the expectation that you'd do the work. I did the work. I showed up to every lecture 15 minutes early. I took notes in blue ink, highlighted key concepts in yellow, and rewrote my notes every evening before bed. It wasn't because I loved studying. It was because for the first time in my life, my effort belonged to me. Every A I earned, every lab report I perfected, every exam I passed, those were mine. Not Richard's, not the house on Cedar Drive. Mine, Stephanie noticed. One night in late October, she looked up from her laptop and said, "Do you ever, relax?" I was at my desk, textbook open, flashcards spread across the surface. "I am relaxed," I said. "You've been studying for 4 hours, Stephanie said. "That's not relaxed, that's a hostage situation." I laughed. "I like studying." "No one likes studying," Stephanie said. "People tolerate studying. What you're doing is something else." She wasn't wrong. But I didn't know how to explain that for 9 years, my time had been currency. I used to buy peace in a house where peace didn't exist. And now that my time was mine, I didn't know what to do with it except fill it with things that proved I deserved to be here. Stephanie sat up. "Okay, here's what's happening. We're going to get food. Real food, not dining hall mystery meat. And you're going to tell me why you study like someone's going to take your textbooks away if you stop." I don't. "Maya," Stephanie said. "I've been your roommate for 2 months. You don't sleep past 6. You don't go to parties. You apologize when you breathe too loud. And last week, I saw you cry in the shower and then pretend everything was fine 10 minutes later. I'm not trying to be pushy, but something's going on and you don't have to carry it alone. I looked at her. She wasn't judging. She was just there, waiting, the way a good person waits when someone needs a minute to decide if they're ready to be honest. Okay, I said. We went to a diner 3 blocks from campus. It was one of those places with red vinyl booths and laminated menus and a waitress who called everyone hun. Stephanie ordered a burger. I ordered coffee and fries. And then I told her, not everything. Not the 9 years of meals and laundry and the way Richard's silence could fill a room like smoke. But enough. The acceptance letter, the deed, Grace's ultimatum, the months of waiting to see if Richard would choose control or me. Stephanie listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in the booth and said, "Your dad's an asshole." "Yeah," I said, "and your grandmother's a badass." "Yeah. And you," Stephanie said, pointing a fry at me, "are allowed to stop proving you deserve to be here. You got in. You're doing great. You don't owe anyone anything, including yourself, except showing up and being a person." I wanted to argue. To explain that I couldn't stop, that if I stopped, I'd remember what it felt like to be powerless. But I didn't say that. I just nodded and ate my fries and let Stephanie talk about her sociology class and her chaotic family back in Vermont and how her younger sister was currently in a fight with their mom about dyeing her hair purple. It was normal. Simple. The kind of conversation I'd never had because I'd never had time for friends. And it felt good. Grace called the next Sunday with news. "Richard's moving out," she said. I was in my dorm room, sitting on my bed with my biology textbook open. I closed it. "What happened?" "He gave notice on Friday," Grace said. "Apparently he found an apartment closer to his work. 1 bedroom above a dry cleaner, $850 a month. Did he say why?" "No," Grace said, "but I think he finally realized that living in my house under my terms was eating away at him. He couldn't stand it." "Where's Jamie going to live?" "With me," Grace said. "David and I already talked about it. Jamie's thriving at school. And I'm not letting Richard uproot him just because his ego can't handle losing." "How's Jamie feel about it?" "Relieved," Grace said. "He didn't say it in those words, but I could tell. Your brother's been walking on eggshells for years, Maya. He's ready for a house where he can breathe." I felt something loosen in my chest. Relief, maybe, or vindication. Richard was leaving. Not because Grace forced him out, but because living in a house where he didn't have control was unbearable for him. He chose to leave. "When's he moving?" I asked. "Next weekend," Grace said. "I'm hiring movers." "I'm not helping him pack, and neither is Jamie." "Good," I said. "There's something else," Grace said. Her tone shifted, softer, more careful. "I found some of your mother's things in the attic. Letters, journals, some photos. I thought you might want them." My throat tightened. "Yeah, I'd like that." "I'll bring them next time I visit," Grace said, "or I can mail them if that's easier." "Next time you visit is fine," I said. We talked for a few more minutes, then hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, trying to process what Grace had just told me. Richard was leaving, Jamie was safe. And somewhere in Grace's attic there were pieces of my mother I'd never seen. I called Jamie that night. "Hey," he said. He sounded tired but not upset. "Grace told me," I said, "about Dad moving out." "Yeah," Jamie said. "It's weird, but also not weird, you know?" "I know." "He asked me if I wanted to come with him," Jamie said, "to the apartment." "What you say?" I said no, Jamie said. I told him I wanted to stay with Grace, finish the school year, keep doing cross-country. He didn't argue, he just said okay and went back to packing. "How do you feel about it?" Jamie was quiet for a moment. "Honestly, I feel bad, like I should feel worse than I do, but I don't, I'm just relieved." "That's okay," I said. "You're allowed to feel relieved." "Are you?" "Yeah," I said. "I am." We talked for a while longer. About school, about cross-country, about the history teacher who apparently told terrible jokes and laughed at them himself. Normal sibling stuff. The kind of conversation we'd never had when we were both living under Richard's roof. Before we hung up, Jamie said, "Thanks for going first." "What?" "For leaving," Jamie said. "For showing me it was possible. I don't think I would have known I could say no if you hadn't done it first." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just said, "I love you." "Love you too," Jamie said. Grace visited 3 weeks later. She drove up on a Saturday morning with a cardboard box in the passenger seat and a thermos of coffee she refused to let get cold. We met in the common room of my dorm, a space with mismatched furniture and a vending machine that only accepted exact change. Grace set the box on the table between us. "These were your mother's," she said. "I went through them before I brought them, just to make sure there wasn't anything that would hurt more than it helped. But everything in here, I think you're ready for." I opened the box. Inside were letters, dozens of them handwritten on lined paper, some folded, some still in envelopes. There were photos, too. Catherine at her high school graduation. Catherine holding me as a newborn. Catherine and Grace standing in front of a house I didn't recognize, both of them laughing. And at the bottom, a journal. Small, leather-bound, with pages that had gone soft from years of handling. "She wrote in that almost every day," Grace said. "From the time she was 16 until about a year before she died. I didn't read all of it, that's for you, but I read enough to know she loved you more than anything in this world." I picked up the journal. The leather was worn smooth, the pages slightly yellowed. I opened it to a random entry. March 12, 2006. "Maya lost her first tooth today. She was so proud. She put it under her pillow and asked if the tooth fairy was real. I told her yes because I'm not ready for her to stop believing in magic yet. Richard said I'm coddling her. Maybe I am, but she's 6. She should get to be 6. I closed the journal. My eyes were burning. "Take your time with it," Grace said. "There's no rush." I nodded. I couldn't speak yet. Grace reached across the table and took my hand. "Your mother wanted you to have a life that belonged to you, Maya. She didn't get that, but you do, and she would be so proud of the person you're becoming." We sat there for a while, not talking, just holding hands across the table in a common room full of students who didn't know that something monumental was happening in the corner by the window. Grace stayed for lunch. We ate at the same diner Stephanie had taken me to, and Grace told me stories about Catherine. Funny ones, small ones, the kind of details that don't make it into eulogies but matter more than anything else. How Catherine used to hum while she cooked. How she cried during every commercial that featured a dog. How she'd wanted to travel to Italy but never got the chance. She had a list, Grace said. Places she wanted to see, things she wanted to do. She kept it in a drawer in the kitchen. I found it after she died. Richard threw it away. Why? Because he couldn't stand the reminder that she'd wanted more than what he gave her, Grace said. I thought about that for a long time after Grace left. That night, I sat on my bed and read my mother's journal. Not all of it, just pieces. Random entries that gave me glimpses of who she'd been before the cancer, before the grief, before she became a name I barely remembered. One entry stood out. September 18, 2008. Richard doesn't understand why I want to go back to school. He says I have everything I need here. A home, a family, a life. But I don't think he realizes that a life isn't the same as the life you want. I love Maya and Jamie more than anything. But sometimes I look at them and I wonder what kind of example I'm setting. That you stay even when you're not happy. That you fold yourself smaller and smaller until you fit into the space someone else carved out for you. I don't want Maya to learn that. I want her to know she can be big. Loud. Unreasonable. I want her to take up space and never apologize for it. I read that entry 3 times. Then I closed the journal, set it on my desk, and stared at it for a long time. My mother had wanted me to be big, and for the first time I thought maybe I could be. November came. Midterms arrived and I survived them. I got an A in biology, a B+ in chemistry, and an A in English composition. I joined a study group for my statistics class, not because I needed help, but because the other students asked, and I said yes instead of making up an excuse. I was learning how to be a person. Richard texted me once during that time. "I'm settled in the new place. Let me know if you want to visit." I didn't respond. Grace told me later that Richard had asked her if I was angry with him. "What'd you tell him?" I asked. "I told him you're not angry," Grace said. "You're just done, and that's worse." She was right. I wasn't angry. Anger required energy, attention, the belief that the other person could still change. I didn't believe that anymore. Richard had made his choices. He'd torn up my acceptance letter. He'd spent 9 years teaching me that my dreams didn't matter. And when I left anyway, when I built a life without his permission, he couldn't handle it. That wasn't my problem to solve. Thanksgiving arrived. Grace invited me to spend it at her house with Jamie and Uncle David. I said yes. The train ride home took 2 hours. Grace picked me up at the station, and we drove to her house. A small 2-story colonial with a front porch and a garden that looked like it belonged in a magazine. Jamie was taller. He hugged me at the door and said, "You look different." "Different how?" "I don't know," Jamie said. "Happier, I guess." Grace cooked a turkey that was slightly dry, but we ate it anyway. Uncle David brought pie. We sat around the table, the 4 of us, and talked about normal things. School, work, the neighbors, a movie Jamie wanted to see. No one mentioned Richard. It was the best Thanksgiving I'd ever had. That night, after Jamie went to bed and David left, Grace and I sat on the porch with mugs of tea. The air was cold, but not unbearable. "Richard called me yesterday," Grace said. I looked at her. "What did he want?" "To know if you were coming home for Thanksgiving," Grace said. "I told him you were, but that you were spending it here. He asked if he could stop by." "What did you say?" "I said no," Grace said. "I told him this was your holiday, and he didn't get to insert himself into it just because he was feeling lonely." "Thank you," I said. "You're welcome," Grace said. "But Maya, at some point, you're going to have to decide what kind of relationship you want with him, or if you want one at all." "I don't know yet," I said. "That's okay," Grace said. "You don't have to know, but when you do, whatever you decide, I'll support it." I nodded and sipped my tea and stared out at the quiet street. I didn't know what I wanted from Richard, but I knew what I didn't want. I didn't want to spend the rest of my life trying to earn something from someone who'd never valued me to begin with. And that felt like enough for now. Winter semester started the first week of January, and I registered for organic chemistry. Everyone said it was the class that weeded out pre-med students. The professor, Dr. Marcus Chen, had a reputation for being brilliant and merciless. The syllabus was 12 pages long. The first exam was worth 25% of our grade. Half the class would drop by week 3. I didn't drop. I went to every lecture, every office hour, every review session. I joined a study group that met in the library on Tuesday and Thursday nights. We worked through problems until the building closed at midnight, then walked back to the dorms in the cold, comparing answers, arguing about mechanisms, testing each other on reaction pathways. It was hard, harder than anything I'd done before, but I liked it. I liked the way chemistry had rules that didn't bend based on who was asking. I liked that the answer was either right or wrong, no gray area, no emotional manipulation. I got a 91 on the first exam. Dr. Chen handed back the tests on a Friday afternoon. He didn't smile, didn't offer congratulations, just placed the paper face down on my desk and moved to the next student. I flipped it over and stared at the red 91 circled at the top. Stephanie was waiting outside the classroom when I walked out. "How'd you do?" she asked. 91, I said. "That's amazing," Stephanie said. "We're celebrating. There's a pizza place down the street that does 2-for-1 on Fridays." "I have to study." "Maya," Stephanie said, "you just aced the hardest exam of the semester. You're allowed to eat pizza and feel good about yourself for 20 minutes. She was right. We went to the pizza place. It was crowded and loud and smelled like garlic and yeast. We ordered a large pepperoni and sat in a booth by the window. Stephanie told me about her day. Her sociology professor who'd gone on a tangent about Foucault for 45 minutes. Her roommate conflict with a girl down the hall who kept stealing her shampoo. Normal college problems, the kind of problems that used to feel impossible because I couldn't imagine having the space to care about shampoo theft. "Can I ask you something?" Stephanie said. "Yeah. Do you ever talk to your dad?" I looked down at my pizza. "No. Does he try to talk to you?" "Sometimes," I said. "He texts every few weeks, asks how I'm doing, I don't respond." "Do you think you ever will?" I thought about that. I don't know, part of me thinks I should. That he's still my father, that I should try to forgive him or at least give him a chance to apologize. But another part of me knows he's never going to apologize, not really. He's going to justify everything he did and expect me to say it's okay. "And you don't want to do that," Stephanie said. "No," I said, "I don't." "Then don't," Stephanie said. "You don't owe him forgiveness just because he's your dad. You don't owe him anything." It was the same thing Grace had said, but hearing it from Stephanie made it feel more real. Like maybe it wasn't just something I told myself to feel better, maybe it was actually true. Richard called me 3 weeks later. It was a Tuesday evening. I was in my dorm room working on a lab report when my phone buzzed. His name appeared on the screen. I stared at it for a long moment, then answered. "Hello?" "Maya," Richard said. His voice was different, quieter, almost uncertain. "I wasn't sure you'd pick up." "I almost didn't," I said. There was a pause. "How are you?" "Fine," I said. "Busy." "Right," Richard said. "School." Another pause. I didn't fill it. "I wanted to talk to you about something," Richard said. "I've been thinking a lot since I moved out, about the way things were, about the way I treated you." I waited. "I wasn't fair to you," Richard said. "After your mother died, I was angry, at the world, at God, at everything. And I took that out on you. I made you responsible for things you shouldn't have been responsible for. I know that now." "Okay," I said. "I'm not expecting you to forgive me," Richard said quickly. "I just wanted you to know that I see it, what I did, and I'm sorry." I sat there holding the phone, staring at the wall. It was the apology I'd imagined hearing for years. But now that I was hearing it, it felt hollow, like he was reading from a script someone had told him to memorize. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Because I don't want to lose you," Richard said. "You're my daughter, and I know I haven't acted like it, but I love you. I want to try to fix this." "You can't fix it," I said. "Maya." "You can't," I repeated. "You didn't just make me cook dinners, Dad. You made me believe I didn't matter, that my dreams were inconvenient, that I existed to make your life easier. And when I got the chance to leave, you tried to take that away from me, too." "I was wrong," Richard said. "I know I was wrong." "Then why did you do it?" I asked. "Why did you tear up my acceptance letter? Why did you tell me no daughter of yours needed an education?" Richard didn't answer right away. When he did, his voice was defensive. "I thought I was protecting you. College is expensive. It's stressful. I didn't want you to take on debt or struggle." "That's not why," I said. "You didn't want me to leave because you'd lose control. That's all it was." "That's not fair." "It's true," I said, "and you know it." The line went quiet. I could hear him breathing. "I'm trying, Maya," Richard said. His voice cracked slightly. "I don't know what else to do." "You could start by accepting that some things don't get fixed," I said. "They just get left behind." "And maybe that's what needs to happen here." "I don't accept that," Richard said. "That's your choice," I said. "But I'm done trying to convince you to see me as a person. I spent 9 years doing that and it didn't work, so I'm moving forward. And if you want to be part of my life, it's going to be on my terms, not yours." "What does that mean?" "It means you don't get to guilt me," I said. "You don't get to show up and expect everything to go back to normal because you said sorry. You don't get to tell me how I should feel or what I owe you. And if you can't accept that, then we don't have anything else to talk about." Richard was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "I'll think about it." "Okay," I said. "Can I call you again?" he asked. "I don't know," I said. "Maybe, but not for a while." "Okay," Richard said. "I understand." We hung up. I sat there staring at my phone, my hands shaking, adrenaline flooding my system. I just told my father the truth, all of it. And I hadn't apologized or softened it or made myself smaller to make him comfortable. It felt terrifying. It also felt right. Grace called the next day. "Richard told me you two talked," she said. "Yeah," I said. "Did he tell you what I said?" "Some of it," Grace said. "He's upset. He thinks you're being unfair." "What do you think?" "I think you were honest," Grace said. "And honesty feels unfair to people who have spent years avoiding it." "He apologized," I said, "but it didn't feel real. It felt like he was apologizing because he thought that's what I wanted to hear." "That's probably true," Grace said. "Your father isn't good at accountability, Maya. He spent his whole life believing he's right about everything. Admitting he was wrong about you, about the way he treated you, that's not something he knows how to do. So what do I do?" "You keep living your life," Grace said. "You don't wait for him to change. You don't put your happiness on hold because he's struggling. You just keep going." "That feels cruel," I said. "It's not," Grace said. "It's self-preservation. And you're allowed to prioritize yourself." I hung up and sat with that for a long time. February passed, then March. Midterms came and went. I got an A in organic chemistry, a B+ in psychology, and an A in anatomy. I started volunteering at a free clinic near campus, shadowing a nurse practitioner on Saturday mornings. The work was hard, the hours were long, but I loved it. I loved being in a place where helping people wasn't expected, It was chosen. Where care was something you gave because you wanted to, not because someone demanded it. Jamie called me in late March with news. I got into UConn, he said. He sounded breathless, excited. Early decision, full ride for cross country. Jamie, that's amazing, I said. I couldn't have done it without you, Jamie said. Seriously, if you hadn't left, if you hadn't shown me it was possible, I would have stayed and let Dad convince me to go to community college or just skip it altogether. You would have figured it out, I said. Maybe, Jamie said, but it would have taken longer. And it would have hurt more. We talked for an hour. About his plans, his major undecided but leaning toward physical therapy, his coach, his times. He sounded happy, lighter than I'd ever heard him. Before we hung up, Jamie said, Dad asked me to tell you he's proud of you. He called you? Yeah, Jamie said. Last week. He wanted to know how you were doing. I didn't tell him much, just that you were doing well. He said he wished he could tell you himself, but he didn't think you'd want to hear it. I don't, I said. I figured, Jamie said. But I told him anyway, so now you know. Thanks, I said. After we hung up, I sat there thinking about what Jamie had said. Richard was proud of me, but he couldn't say it to my face. He had to go through Jamie like a message passed through a third party, stripped of any real weight or meaning. It was the most Richard thing I could imagine. Spring arrived. The campus turned green. Students sat on the quad with textbooks and frisbees. The air smelled like cut grass and possibility. I was sitting outside one afternoon in April, studying for my anatomy final when my phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. Hi Maya, this is Sarah Jennings. I was a friend of your mother's. Grace gave me your number. I'd love to talk if you have time. I stared at the message. Sarah Jennings. The name sounded familiar, but I couldn't place it. I texted back. Hi Sarah, I'm at school right now, but I can call you this weekend? That would be perfect, thank you. I called Grace that night. Who's Sarah Jennings? I asked. She was your mother's best friend from nursing school, Grace said. They lost touch after Catherine got married, but Sarah reached out to me last month. She wanted to connect with you. Why? She has some things of your mother's, Grace said. Letters, photos, some stuff from their nursing program. She thought you might want them. Did Mom talk to her about things? I don't know, Grace said, but Sarah seems like a good person. I think it's worth hearing what she has to say. I called Sarah that Saturday. She answered on the second ring. Her voice was warm, slightly raspy, like someone who laughed often. Maya, she said, thank you for calling. I wasn't sure if you'd want to talk to a stranger about your mom. I want to hear anything I can, I said. Your mother was one of the kindest people I've ever known, Sarah said. We met our first day of nursing school. She sat next to me in anatomy and let me copy her notes when I fell behind. We were inseparable for 2 years. What happened? She met your father, Sarah said. Her tone shifted, careful. And things changed. He didn't like her spending time with friends. He said she needed to focus on being a wife, so we drifted apart. Did she tell you that? Not in those words, Sarah said, but I could see it. The way she canceled plans last minute, the way she stopped calling. I tried to reach out a few times, but she always said she was busy. Eventually, I stopped trying. I didn't say anything. I regret that, Sarah said quietly. I should have pushed harder. I should have asked her if she was okay. It's not your fault, I said. Maybe not, Sarah said, but I carry it anyway. Your mother deserved better, and I want you to know that she was brilliant, Maya. She was going to be an incredible nurse. She had the kind of empathy you can't teach and the kind of intelligence that made everything look easy. She didn't get to finish, but she was so close. I know, I said. Grace told me. I have some of her old assignments, Sarah said. Papers she wrote, care plans she developed. I saved them because I thought one day she'd want them back. But she never asked, so I'm giving them to you. Thank you, I said. My voice was shaky. You're welcome, Sarah said. Your grandmother told me you're studying to be a nurse. Your mother would be so proud. We talked for another 20 minutes. Sarah told me stories about my mother, small moments that painted a picture of who Catherine had been before Richard, before the cancer, before everything fell apart. When we hung up, I felt something I hadn't expected. Gratitude. Not for what my mother's life became, but for the fact that she'd existed at all. That she'd had dreams and friends and a version of herself that was bigger than the role Richard had forced her into. And I realized something else. I wasn't just living my own life. I was living the life my mother never got to have. Finals week arrived at the end of April, and I survived it. Anatomy, organic chemistry, psychology, statistics. 4 exams in 5 days. I lived in the library, subsisted on coffee and granola bars, and emerged on Friday afternoon with grades that proved I belonged here. Not because Richard allowed it, not because Grace rescued me, because I'd earned it. Summer break started the first week of May. Most students went home. I didn't. I'd applied for a research position in Dr. Reyes's lab, a 10-week program studying cellular responses to stress. The work was tedious, repetitive, and exactly what I needed. Pipetting samples, recording data, running the same protocols over and over until they became muscle memory. It was the first summer of my life where I got to decide what I did with my time. Grace visited in June. She drove up on a Saturday morning with a cooler full of sandwiches and a folder of documents she said I needed to see. We met in the park near campus, a quiet space with benches and walking paths and trees that provided enough shade to make the heat bearable. Grace spread the sandwiches out on a bench and handed me the folder. "What's this?" I asked. "Catherine's nursing school records," Grace said. "Transcripts, evaluations, letters of recommendation. Sarah sent them to me last month. I thought you should have them." I opened the folder. Inside were pages of transcripts. My mother's grades, all A's and B+, clean, consistent, proof of the intelligence Sarah had described. There were clinical evaluations, comments from instructors praising her compassion and attention to detail. And at the bottom, a letter of recommendation from a professor named Dr. Ellen Martinez. Catherine Bennett is one of the most dedicated students I have had the privilege of teaching. Her clinical skills are exceptional, but what sets her apart is her ability to connect with patients. She has a rare gift for making people feel seen, heard, and cared for in moments of vulnerability. I have no doubt she will be an asset to any healthcare team. I read the letter twice. Then I closed the folder and set it on the bench beside me. "She was so close," I said. "I know," Grace said. "Why didn't she just leave?" I asked. "Why didn't she finish school and take me and Jamie and just go?" Grace was quiet for a moment. "Because she loved him, or she thought she did, and because leaving is harder than people think, especially when you've been taught that staying is what good women do." "Did she ever talk to you about it?" "Once," Grace said. "About a year before she got sick. She called me late one night. She'd been crying. She said she felt trapped, that every day felt like she was disappearing a little more. I told her she could leave, that I'd help her, that she and the kids could stay with me, but she said she couldn't do that to Richard, that it would destroy him. So she destroyed herself instead," I said. "Yes," Grace said, "and I've lived with that for 15 years, wondering if I could have done more, if I should have pushed harder." "It's not your fault," I said. "I know," Grace said, "but knowing that doesn't make it easier." We sat in silence for a while, eating sandwiches and watching people walk past with dogs and strollers and the easy confidence of people who'd never had to choose between their dreams and their survival. "How's Jamie?" I asked. "He's good," Grace said. "Excited about UConn. He's been running every morning training for cross country. David's been going with him. It's been good for both of them." "And Richard?" Grace's expression shifted. "He's struggling. He calls me once a week, asks about you, about Jamie. He wants to know if you're ever going to talk to him again. What do you tell him?" "That it's not up to me," Grace said. "That he needs to give you space and stop expecting forgiveness on his timeline." "How does he take that?" "Poorly," Grace said. "He thinks you're being unreasonable, that he apologized and you should move on." "Of course he does," I said. Grace reached over and squeezed my hand. "You don't owe him anything, Maya. Not forgiveness, not a relationship, not even closure. Whatever you decide, I'm with you." "Thank you," I said. After Grace left, I went back to my dorm and stared at my mother's records for a long time. The transcripts, the evaluations, the letter from Dr. Martinez. Proof that Catherine Bennett had been brilliant, capable, and one bad decision away from a completely different life. I thought about what Grace had said. That leaving is harder than people think. And I realized something I hadn't fully understood before. My mother didn't fail. The system failed her. The belief that love meant sacrifice. The expectation that women should shrink themselves to fit into someone else's vision of who they should be. The silence that made it impossible to ask for help without feeling like you'd failed at being a wife, a mother, a woman. Catherine had tried. She'd fought. And when fighting became too exhausting, she'd survived the only way she knew how, by staying quiet. I wasn't going to do that. July came. The research program was going well. I'd moved from basic pipetting to running independent experiments, analyzing data, presenting findings at lab meetings. Dr. Reyes told me I had a future in research if I wanted it. I wasn't sure yet, but knowing I had options felt like freedom. Richard called me in mid-July. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. Maya, it's Dad. I know you don't want to talk to me, I get it, but I wanted you to know I'm proud of you. I heard about your research position. That's a big deal. Your mother would be proud, too. I listened to the voicemail twice. Then I deleted it, not out of anger, not out of spite, just because I didn't need to carry it anymore. Grace called 2 days later. Richard's in the hospital, she said. My stomach dropped. What happened? Nothing serious, Grace said quickly. He had chest pains, thought it was a heart attack. Turned out to be anxiety. They're keeping him overnight for observation, but he's fine. Where's Jamie? With me, Grace said. David's at the hospital with Richard. I wanted to let you know in case he tries to reach out. Is he going to? Probably, Grace said. He told David he wants to talk to you, that this made him realize life's too short to be estranged from his kids. I closed my eyes. Grace, I can't. I know, Grace said. You don't have to, I just wanted you to be prepared. Richard texted me that night. Maya, I'm in the hospital. I'm okay, but I'd really like to talk to you. Please. I stared at the message for 10 minutes. Then I called Jamie. He said. Grace told you? Yeah, I said. How is he? Fine, Jamie said. Dramatic, but fine. The doctors said it was a panic attack. They gave him something to calm him down, and now he's milking it for sympathy. Has he asked about me? Like 6 times, Jamie said. He keeps saying he needs to talk to you, that he's had some kind of epiphany. Uncle David told him to give you space, but you know Dad. Yeah, I said. I know Dad. Are you going to call him? I don't know, I said. Part of me thinks I should. That if something actually happens to him, I'll regret not talking to him, but another part of me knows this is just another manipulation, that he's using this to guilt me into giving him what he wants. I think it's both, Jamie said. I think he's scared, but I also think he's incapable of asking for forgiveness without making it about him. So what do I do? Whatever you want, Jamie said. If you want to call him, call him. If you don't, don't. But don't do it because you feel guilty. Do it because you actually want to. I hung up and sat with that. Did I want to talk to Richard? No, but did I want to live with the knowledge that I'd refuse to talk to him when he asked? Also no. I called the hospital the next morning. The nurse transferred me to Richard's room. He answered on the 3rd ring. Maya, his voice was hoarse, uncertain. Yeah, I said, it's me. Thank you for calling, Richard said. I wasn't sure you would. Jamie said you wanted to talk. I do, Richard said. Being here, thinking I might be dying, it made me realize I've wasted so much time. I've spent the last year angry at you for leaving, angry at your grandmother for taking the house, angry at everyone except the person who actually deserved it. Who's that? Me, Richard said. I'm the one who ruined everything. I know that now, and I want to fix it. I took a breath. You can't fix it, Dad. I told you that already. I know you said that, but nothing, I said. You keep saying you want to fix things, but what you really want is for me to pretend none of it happened. You want me to come home, act like we're a normal family, and never bring up the fact that you spent 9 years treating me like a housekeeper instead of a daughter. That's not fair. It's true, I said, and until you can accept that, we don't have anything to talk about. Richard was quiet. Then he said, What do you want from me, Maya? Tell me what to do, and I'll do it. I want you to stop acting like this is something you can fix with an apology, I said. I want you to accept that you hurt me, that you made choices that damaged our relationship, and that those choices have consequences. I do accept that. No, you don't, I said. You say you do, but then you turn around and act like I'm being unreasonable for not forgiving you, like I'm the problem because I won't just get over it. I never said that. You don't have to say it, I said. It's in everything you do. The way you text me asking how I'm doing like nothing happened. The way you tell Jamie you're proud of me instead of telling me. The way you called me from the hospital expecting me to drop everything because you had a panic attack. I thought I was dying. But you weren't, I said. And even if you were, that doesn't erase 9 years of you making me feel like I didn't matter. The line went quiet. I could hear Richard breathing, slow and unsteady. "I don't know how to fix this," he said finally. His voice was small, defeated. "I know," I said, "and that's the problem. You keep waiting for me to tell you how to make this better, but I can't do that. You have to figure it out on your own. And maybe when you do, if you do, we can try to have a relationship. But until then, I need you to leave me alone." Maya. "I mean it," I said. "Don't call, don't text, don't ask Jamie or Grace to pass messages. I need space and you need to respect that." Richard didn't say anything for a long time. Then he said, "Okay, I'll leave you alone." "Thank you," I said. I hung up. My hands were shaking. My chest felt tight. But underneath the adrenaline and the guilt and the complicated mess of emotions I didn't have names for, there was something else. Relief. I'd said everything I needed to say. I'd drawn a boundary and enforced it. And for the first time in my life, I hadn't apologized for taking up space. Grace called me that afternoon. "Richard told David what happened," she said. "He's upset." "I know," I said. "But he also told David you were right," Grace said. "That he's been expecting you to do the work of fixing a relationship he broke. Did he mean it?" "I don't know," Grace said. "But it's the first time he's admitted that he's the problem, not you. That's progress." "It doesn't feel like progress," I said. "It's not supposed to," Grace said. "Progress is slow and uncomfortable and doesn't come with a clear ending. But it's still progress." I wanted to believe that. I wanted to believe Richard was capable of change, that one day we'd have a relationship that didn't hurt. But I couldn't let myself hope for that yet. Hope required trust, and trust required time. I went back to work. The lab, the experiments, the clean simplicity of science. Dr. Reyes asked me to co-author a paper on our findings. I said yes. August arrived. The research program ended. I packed up my dorm room, said goodbye to Stephanie, who was spending the rest of the summer in Vermont, and took the train to Grace's house. Jamie was there when I arrived. Taller, broader, more confident than I'd seen him in months. He hugged me at the door and said, "You look good." "So do you," I said. Grace made dinner. Grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, a salad Jamie claimed to like but barely touched. We ate on the back porch, the three of us, watching the sun set over the neighborhood. "Richard called me yesterday," Grace said. "He asked if you were coming home for the rest of the summer." "What did you tell him?" "That you were staying here," Grace said. "He asked if he could stop by." I said no. "Thank you," I said. "He's trying," Grace said, "in his own broken way, but trying isn't the same as succeeding." "I know," I said. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, then Jamie said, "I'm scared." Grace and I both looked at him. "Of what?" I asked. "Of becoming him," Jamie said. "Of waking up one day and realizing I've spent my whole life controlling people because I'm too afraid to let them leave." "You won't," I said. "How do you know?" "Because you're aware of it," I said. "Because you're asking the question." Dad never did that. He never looked at himself and wondered if he was the problem. "You already have." Jamie nodded slowly. "I hope you're right." "I am," I said, and I believed it. The rest of August passed quietly. I spent my days reading, running, helping Grace with projects around the house. Jamie left for Yukon in mid-August. I drove up with Grace to help him move into his dorm. He cried when we left, but they were good tears. The kind that come from stepping into something new and realizing you're ready for it. Grace and I drove back in silence. Halfway home, she said, "You did good, Maya." "With what?" "With everything," Grace said. "With leaving, with surviving, with becoming the person your mother wanted you to be." I looked out the window at the trees blurring past, green and gold in the late summer light. "I'm not done yet," I said. "No," Grace said, "but you're close." Sophomore year started the last week of August. I moved into a different dorm, a single room this time. Small, quiet mine. The walls were bare when I arrived, but I fixed that quickly. The photo of my mother at the pumpkin patch went above my desk. Next to it, a printed quote from one of her journal entries. "I want her to know she can be big." Stephanie lived 2 floors down. We got coffee every Thursday morning before our 9:00 a.m. classes and studied together on weekends. She'd declared a double major in sociology and women's studies, and spent most of her free time organizing campus events and arguing with people on the internet about labor rights. "You should come to the rally next week," she said one afternoon in September. We were in the library supposedly studying, but Stephanie had abandoned her textbook 20 minutes ago. "What rally?" Student workers, Stephanie said. The university's trying to cut wages for dining hall staff. We're pushing back. I don't know, I said. I'm not really a rally person. You don't have to give a speech, Stephanie said. Just show up, stand there, be a body that says this matters. I thought about that. About the 9 years I'd spent being a body that did what it was told. About the way silence had felt safer than speaking up. Okay, I said, I'll come. The rally was the following Tuesday. About 200 students gathered on the quad with signs and megaphones and a determination that felt infectious. I stood near the back with Stephanie, listening to speakers talk about wages and dignity and the value of labor. I didn't hold a sign. I didn't chant. I just stood there, one person among many, and felt something shift inside me. Being visible didn't require being loud. It just required showing up. October arrived. The campus turned the kind of beautiful that makes you forget winter is coming. I joined a pre-med student organization, not because I needed it for my application, but because the meetings were interesting and the people were kind. I volunteered at the free clinic every Saturday, shadowing nurses, learning how to take blood pressure, how to talk to patients who were scared or in pain or just needed someone to listen. I was good at it, the listening part especially. Grace called every Sunday evening. We talked about school, about Jamie, about the tenants in the Cedar Drive house who just renewed their lease for another year. We didn't talk about Richard unless I brought him up. I didn't bring him up. One Thursday in mid-October, I was walking back to my dorm after class when my phone rang. Uncle David's name appeared on the screen. Hey, I said. Everything okay? Yeah, David said. I just wanted to check in. See how you're doing? I'm good, I said. Busy, but good. That's great, David said. Listen, I wanted to tell you something. Richard's been going to therapy. I stopped walking. What? He started in September, David said. Grace suggested it after the hospital thing. He's been seeing someone once a week. I don't know all the details, but he mentioned it last time we talked. Said it's been helping. Helping with what? Understanding why he is the way he is, David said. His childhood, his relationship with your grandfather, the way he handled Catherine's death. He's finally looking at it instead of pretending it doesn't matter. I didn't know what to say to that. I'm not telling you this because I think you should call him, David said quickly. I'm telling you because I thought you'd want to know that he's trying, in a real way this time. Okay, I said. Thanks for telling me. Of course, David said. And Maya, whatever you decide about your relationship with him, I'm here. For both of you, we hung up. I stood on the sidewalk, students streaming past me, and tried to process what David had just said. Richard was in therapy. It didn't change what he'd done. It didn't erase 9 years of control and silence and the night he tore up my acceptance letter, but it meant something. It meant he was trying. I called Grace that night. David told you, she said. Yeah. I wasn't sure if I should mention it, Grace said. I didn't want you to feel pressured. I don't, I said. I'm just surprised. So was I, Grace said, but I think it's good. Whether it changes anything between you two, I don't know, but at least he's doing the work. Do you think he'll actually change? Grace was quiet for a moment. I think he's capable of understanding himself better. Whether that translates to being a better father, I can't say. People are complicated, Maya. They can grow without becoming someone you want in your life. I know, I said. You don't have to make any decisions right now, Grace said. You're allowed to just sit with this information and see how you feel. Okay, I said. I sat with it for 3 weeks. During that time, I didn't hear from Richard. No texts, no calls, no messages passed through Jamie or Grace. He was doing what I'd asked, leaving me alone, giving me space. It should have felt like a relief. Instead, it felt like a question I didn't know how to answer. November came. Thanksgiving was approaching, and Grace invited me to spend it at her house. Jamie was coming home from Yukon. Uncle David would be there, and Grace said carefully that Richard had asked if he could come too. What did you tell him? I asked. That it wasn't my decision, Grace said, that if he wanted to be there, he needed to ask you himself. Did he? Not yet, Grace said, but I think he will. She was right. Richard texted me 3 days before Thanksgiving. Maya, I know I'm supposed to be giving you space. But I wanted to ask if it would be okay if I came to Thanksgiving at your grandmother's house. I understand if the answer is no, I just thought I should ask. I stared at the message for 10 minutes, then I called Jamie. He asked you too, didn't he? Jamie said. Yeah. What are you going to say? I don't know, I said. What are you going to say? I told him yes, Jamie said. But I also told him that if he shows up and acts like everything's normal, I'm leaving. He needs to understand that being invited doesn't mean everything's fixed. Did he understand? He said he did, Jamie said. Whether that's true, we'll find out. I hung up and stared at Richard's text for another 5 minutes, then I typed a response. You can come, but we're not pretending everything's okay, and if I need to leave, I'm leaving. He responded immediately. I understand, thank you. Thanksgiving Day arrived cold and gray. I took the train to Grace's house, arriving around noon. Jamie was already there, sitting on the couch with a mug of hot chocolate and a cross-country hoodie that looked 2 sizes too big. Dad's not here yet, he said when I walked in. Okay, I said. Grace was in the kitchen pulling a turkey out of the oven. The house smelled like butter and herbs and the complicated comfort of a meal someone spent hours preparing because they wanted to, not because they had to. You doing okay? Grace asked. I don't know yet, I said. Richard arrived at 1:00. He knocked instead of walking in, which felt significant. Grace answered the door, and I heard his voice from the kitchen, quiet and polite, asking if he should take off his shoes. He walked into the living room a moment later. He looked smaller than I remembered, thinner. His hair was grayer, his posture less certain. He was holding a bottle of wine and a container of something I couldn't identify. Hi, he said. He was looking at me. Hi, I said. I brought cranberry sauce, Richard said. He held up the container. Homemade, I followed Catherine's recipe. I don't know if it's any good, but I tried. Grace took the container. I'm sure it's perfect. Richard sat in the armchair across from me. Jamie sat on the couch. Uncle David arrived 10 minutes later, and the 5 of us stood in the kitchen making small talk while Grace finished the meal. The conversation was careful, surface level, the kind of exchange people have when they're trying not to say the wrong thing. We sat down to eat at 2:00. Grace said a short blessing, thanking no one in particular for the food and the family and the chance to be together. We passed dishes, filled plates, and ate in a silence that wasn't quite comfortable but wasn't hostile either. Halfway through the meal, Richard cleared his throat. I want to say something, he said. Everyone looked at him. He set down his fork and looked at me. I've been seeing a therapist, Richard said. For the past 2 months, I'm working on understanding why I treated you the way I did, why I made you responsible for things you shouldn't have been responsible for, why I couldn't let you leave without trying to control it. I didn't say anything. I know saying I'm sorry isn't enough, Richard continued. I know I can't undo what I did, but I want you to know that I'm trying to be better. Not because I expect you to forgive me, but because you deserve a father who sees you as a person, not as someone who exists to make his life easier. The table was quiet. Jamie was staring at his plate. Grace was watching Richard with an expression I couldn't read. Uncle David was nodding slightly, like he'd heard parts of this before. Thank you for saying that, I said finally. Richard nodded. I mean it. I know, I said. But it's going to take time for me to trust that you've actually changed. I understand, Richard said. We finished the meal, cleaned up the dishes together, packed leftovers into containers, moved to the living room for coffee. The conversation shifted to safer topics. Jamie's classes, my research, Uncle David's new job, the neighbors who just adopted a puppy and brought it over to meet Grace. Richard didn't try to dominate the conversation. He didn't interrupt or correct or steer things back to himself. He just listened, participated, acted like a guest instead of someone who expected the room to revolve around him. It wasn't perfect, but it was different. Around 5:00, Richard stood up to leave. Thank you for letting me come, he said. He was looking at Grace, but the words were for all of us. You're welcome, Grace said. Richard looked at me. Can I give you a hug? I hesitated. Then I stood up and let him hug me. It was brief, awkward, the kind of embrace 2 people have when they're not sure how to touch each other anymore. I'm proud of you, Richard said quietly. I should have said that a long time ago. Thank you, I said. He left. The house felt lighter after he was gone, but not in a bad way, just quieter, calmer. That went better than I expected, Jamie said. It did, Grace said. I didn't say anything. I just sat on the couch, processing what had just happened, trying to figure out how I felt about it. The answer wasn't simple. Richard had shown up. He'd been respectful. He'd acknowledged what he'd done without making excuses. And for the first time in my life, he'd treated me like an adult whose boundaries mattered. But one good day didn't erase 9 bad years. I went back to school the following Monday. Finals were approaching. I spent December studying, writing papers, preparing for exams. I got A's in anatomy and organic chemistry, a B+ in psychology. Dr. Reyes asked me to continue working in her lab through the spring semester. I said yes. Richard texted me twice during December. Once to wish me luck on finals, once to say Merry Christmas. I responded to both with a simple thank you. I wasn't ready for more than that yet. January arrived. Spring semester started. I declared my major officially, biology with a pre-med track. I signed up for classes that would prepare me for the MCAT. I started shadowing a physician at the free clinic, watching her diagnose patients, explain treatment plans, navigate the complicated intersection of medicine and humanity. I loved it. One evening in late January, I was studying in my dorm when my phone rang. Richard's name appeared on the screen. I almost didn't answer, but something in me, maybe curiosity, maybe readiness, made me pick up. "Hi," I said. "Hi," Richard said. "Is this a bad time? I'm studying, but I can talk for a few minutes." "I won't keep you long," Richard said. "I just wanted to tell you something. I've been reading your mother's journals." I sat up straighter. "Grace gave them to you?" "No," Richard said. "I found them in a box in the garage. I didn't know she'd kept journals. I've been reading them over the past few weeks, and Maya, I had no idea how unhappy she was, how much I hurt her." I didn't say anything. "She wanted to finish nursing school," Richard said. "She wanted to work. She wanted a life outside of being my wife and your mother, and I told her no. I convinced her that staying home was the right thing to do, that she was being selfish for wanting more, and she listened. She stayed, and she spent the last years of her life feeling trapped." "I know," I said quietly. "I did the same thing to you," Richard said. "I tried to trap you the way I trapped her, and I'm so sorry, Maya. I'm so sorry. I almost succeeded." I closed my eyes. My throat felt tight. "Thank you for saying that," I said. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Richard said. "I just wanted you to know that I see it now, what I did, what I took from both of you, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life trying to be better." "Okay," I said. "Okay," Richard said. We hung up. I sat there staring at my textbook, not seeing the words, just feeling the weight of what Richard had said settle somewhere deep in my chest. It didn't fix anything. It didn't erase the past or make the future certain, but it was honest. And honesty was a start. Spring passed. Summer came. I worked in Dr. Reyes' lab again, this time on a project studying genetic markers for breast cancer. The work was difficult, meaningful, and gave me something my mother never had: the chance to fight back against the thing that had taken her. I saw Richard twice that summer. Once at a family barbecue at Grace's house. Once when he drove up to Boston to take me to lunch. Both times he was careful, respectful, present without being intrusive. We didn't talk about the past. We talked about the present. My classes, his job, Jamie's success at UConn, the weather, books we'd read, movies we'd seen. It wasn't the relationship I'd wanted as a child, but it was the relationship we were capable of now. And that was enough. I'm 20 years old now. Junior year starts next week. I'm on track to graduate in 2 years, apply to medical school, become the nurse practitioner my mother never got to be. I live in a single dorm on the 5th floor of a building that overlooks the quad. My walls are covered with photos. My mother at the pumpkin patch, Jamie at his high school graduation, Grace in her garden, Stephanie making a ridiculous face at a coffee shop. On my desk, next to my biology textbooks, sits my mother's journal. I read it sometimes when I need to remember where I came from. When I need to remember that silence isn't loyalty and leaving isn't giving up. Richard and I talk once a month. Sometimes more, sometimes less. We're building something new, something that doesn't look like the relationship we had before because that relationship wasn't worth saving. This one might be. Grace calls every Sunday. Jamie texts me memes at 2:00 a.m. Stephanie drags me to rallies and movie nights and reminds me that I'm allowed to exist for reasons other than productivity. I'm learning how to do that. To exist, to take up space without apologizing, to believe that I deserve the life I've built. Some days it's easy, some days it's not, but I'm here, I'm 20 years old. I'm studying to become a nurse practitioner, and I'm living the life my mother never got to have, not because I owe it to her, but because she showed me it was possible. And that's enough.